Hey guys, episode 76 starts now. Joining me today, Dr. Aaron Carroll, CNBC's Ron Insana, and comedian Christian Finnegan. Let's do this. Hello, everybody. Today is the Friday, April 3rd episode of Stand Up. Three excellent guests joining me today. It's the first Friday of April. You are going to have the job numbers, and they're going to be bad. Let's go to one of my favorite nightly email newsletters from Matt Kaiser. It's What the Fuck Just Happened Today, and you can read that, by the way, whatthefuckjusthappenedtoday.com. I always love the way he opens, and it's a good way to open this show. Today, in one sentence, day 1169 of the Trump presidency, more than 6.6 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits last week. The coronavirus has infected 1 million people globally. The Trump administration is expected to urge all Americans to wear cloth masks or other face coverings in public to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. An unclassified Army briefing document on the coronavirus from February 3rd projected that, quote, between 80,000 and 150,000 could die. The Navy relieved the captain who sounded the alarm about an outbreak of COVID-19 aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and the Secret Service signed a $45,000 contract this week to rent a fleet of golf carts in Northern Virginia, home to one of Trump's golf clubs. I'm Pete Dominick. It's time to stand up. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me on the program. Every day we're here now doing the show for you. Every day I've got great guests. Yesterday's show were some really good guests because it was you. Tons of several listeners, 6, I think, in total. I reached out to, I had great conversations, and people absolutely loved yesterday's episode. So definitely go back and take a listen to the Thursday episode 75, I think it was. But right now, I've got the great doctor, Dr. Aaron Carroll, and I've been touting his work for over 10 years. And one silver lining of this horrible situation is that more and more big media outlets are going to experts, including our favorite Dr. Aaron Carroll. And you never know where my conversations with Dr. Carroll or anybody else are going to go. And he has been tweeting about a new recipe. And, well, we start with that. So wait a second. What is this bacon thing that you did the other day?
Okay. So first I cured and then smoked my own bacon.
That's impressive.
And when I cooked the bacon, I put it in the oven on a rack so that it dripped, the bacon fat dripped into a pan underneath, saved that. Then later I took 1.5 ounces of the bacon fat, reheated it up so it was liquid, let it mix with a bottle of bourbon, shook it up, got it all mixed together, let it sit for 4 hours.
I'm sorry, let it mix with a bottle, but you put the bacon grease inside?
Into a bottle. Like I poured bourbon into a big mason jar, and then I put 1.5 ounces of liquid bacon fat in there, let it mix up and combine for like 4 hours. Then I put it in the freezer for an hour or two, just so it really separated out.
Wow. Got
the bacon fat, drained it through cheesecloth, so you just had the nice bourbon left, and it's now bacony flavored.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Aaron Carroll.
Then you make an old fashioned, but instead of simple syrup, you use maple syrup, and you get like the bacon and the maple syrup, and it's delicious.
Did you learn this process from someone else, or did you come up with it yourself?
Oh, I don't have the book in here. There's a book called Hacking Whiskey. It's phenomenal. This is one of the bacon fat washing your whiskey, fat washing your whiskey is just a chapter.
The only thing you didn't do is
amazing book.
The only thing you didn't do is kill the hog yourself.
I've blended. I've put it in little barrels.
Did anybody else get to enjoy it? Did your wife enjoy it?
Of course, no. Amy's like drink of choice is an old fashioned. Nice. So this is just
very,
great.
Very impressive, sir. Thank you for joining me.
We're on lockdown. I got to do something.
What else have you come up with or done? I mean, you did this thing.
Are you kidding me? Oh my God! So like in the last 2 weeks, I've. Let's see. I have, what am I looking? I'm losing my, I made a fermented hot sauce. My fermented ketchup is almost finished. I have pickled multiple vegetables, including pickles. I've made sauerkraut. I have also fermented some other vegetables. I have made like 6-hour red sauce more than once. I have made General Tso's chicken. I made like chicken nuggets. We've made homemade French fries.
And you shared a lot of this on your
meatballs from scratch. Oh yeah. Like I'm obsessed with like YouTube cooking shows, especially 2 of them. And I love like, I don't like this thing. I don't want like how to make a meal in one pan in a half an hour. I need to like fill my time. So like I like this, this red sauce will take 6 hours. Sign me up. These meatballs require like 42 steps, including like making gelatin chicken stock and putting that inside the meatballs so that when it cooks, the chicken stock like sign me up. I want complicated, long things. I make my dumplings and my egg rolls and my spring rolls from scratch, baby. We're doing it all.
Somehow I think you're also multitasking while you're making. Are you also giving interviews to NPR, et cetera?
Sometimes. Well, 6-hour sauce, you only got to check on it like once every hour and a half. So you can get a lot of stuff done in between. The dumplings take a while. So egg rolls were easier than you think. So I enjoy these. Like I gotta do. So I don't know, man. It's like I gotta fill my brain. I gotta keep it going. I gotta do something.
I hear you. My brain doesn't work quite like yours. That's for sure. But my big question to you is, how come you've tried so many things over the past couple of years and tried to, from drawing to learning other languages to just fascinating things that you've tried to learn, you've documented it. But why are you opposed to the only thing that I'm really interested in, gardening?
I've done gardening. I did try it. I just,
growing some plants under lights.
Much work. This is the thing. Like I would be totally into. I told Amy this. I'd be totally into like an herb garden in the sunroom. But the outside gardening it was just too much. Plus the dig up the yard again and start all. It's just I don't know. A lot of my neighbors are totally into it. I did it for years in Seattle, and it just wasn't my thing.
All right. Well, I mean, the herb garden in the sunroom is very doable, my friend. I want to see that happen.
I'm going to do that. Like, we'll get there. One thing at a time.
I want to get to your most recent piece at The Atlantic. 3 pieces now that first 2 you co-authored. This one is all you, titled "We Need 1 Million Tests a Week." But as we tape this, I just saw the news that President Trump has again been tested, and he got a negative result again. But what I saw was the results came back in 15 minutes. And I heard
they were using one of those new point of care tests. I mean, this is what they said. We need a lot of those. We need lots of those.
Okay. So there is a test that exists that gives you rapid results. But the problem is it's not very, it's not ready. It's not.
Well, I think they've got it. It's just not scaled up.
Scaled up.
We need like 1 million of these a week. Like it's not like we don't need like one for the president. We need massive testing, massive.
You start this piece at The Atlantic, Dr. Carroll, with, although President Trump claimed yesterday that coronavirus testing is no longer a problem, the fact is that the U.S. is still not testing enough. When the president says that testing is no longer a problem, that's obviously an accurate statement to say that.
That's not right. That is incorrect. Testing is still a big problem.
What is the challenge? What are the challenges with testing?
We don't have enough, and they're not fast enough. It's like it's not enough just to, take the swab. It's like you got to get the results, and some of these tests are taking days to a week. It's like and we're still playing catch up. Like we're doing tests at this point for like acute care only, like people that we know are sick. Like 20% of the people we actually test turn out to be positive. That's crazy. That's not where we need to be. When I say we need 750,000, let's say 1 million tests just to be safe, 1 million tests, that's like after we've suppressed that. And when we do that, we don't want many of them to be positive. Like right now, South Korea is, less than 100 cases a day, I think. And they're still doing 10,000 tests a day, which means that like their percentage of positive is less than 1%. Like I just said, we're like at 20. We need to get to a point where cases are rare and we still have the capacity to test everyone who potentially might be sick. And we want to see almost none of them being sick, but we need to be able to do massive testing. And we're not even close.
You say first in line for testing, of course, should be health workers. Why?
Now, we got to prioritize. We're rationed. So we got to prioritize. So right now it's got to be healthcare workers and people in hospitals, because healthcare workers, we got to protect, and we got to know who's infected. And we got to get them off the front line, and we got to know when they're okay to come back. And so they need to be tested. And hospitalized patients, because it's really important for triage. Who needs to be isolated from everybody else? Who needs certain levels of care and what's coming? Yes. After that, then yes, we still want to keep testing, potential cases and everything else. But at some point we got to shift. Again, suppression. We got to get these down. And once we get them down, then we still need like 1 million tests potentially just in reserve a week. We're not even there in the emergency situation, let alone in the future.
You also write in this piece that we also need a legion of public health workers to identify all of the infected person's close contacts, check them for symptoms, and test them. Who's doing that? That's are other countries doing that?
Oh yeah. This is the thing. There's this chart going around that has the world, and there are
you just said the cunt. That's all you said was the cunt.
I said the country. I
didn't hear that. I just heard the cunt.
3 lines like this that are sort of flat. They're Asian countries, and all these lines going up, and they're everybody else. And then somebody circled the 3 Asian countries and goes masks. Like masks are the difference. No, they're doing massive testing and social isolation and quarantine, and they're also doing phenomenal contact tracing. So in Singapore or South Korea, when they test and they get a positive, they immediately send out people they probably check their cell phones first, and they're like, who have you been in contact with in the last 72 hours? And they find all of those people and they isolate them and they test them. And that we need to be able to track down everyone who's been exposed to the people who've been contacted, isolate them or quarantine them, and test them to see if they're positive. And if they are, do the same thing again, because we have to be able to catch all of the people who could potentially spreading this once we've suppressed it, to prevent an outbreak again and go right back into this.
I appreciate all your work, and I appreciate all the research and these articles and interviews that you're doing. Yeah, enjoy. I got to get it done too.
No, because none of this is good. None of this is good. We're not prepared.
I know, but here's the thing. You're giving a prescription as to what this country needs to do, but you've also been one of the most staunch critics of America's healthcare system for a long time. This isn't Trump. This isn't the Republicans. So
this isn't even my usual complaints about the healthcare system. These are my complaints about the public health system and how underfunded and undermanned it is. Because what's happening right now is all of the testing and everything we're doing is the healthcare system. Eventually, we have to take that out of the healthcare system and give it to the public health system. They're the ones that are going to have to do the contact tracing, isolation, quarantining, and everything else. We don't even have that in many cities, let alone the tests. We need to staff up and train up and get all this ready. And I don't think anyone's taught. Now, granted, yes, right now everyone is mostly focused on putting out the fire, getting a handle on the outbreak and making sure hospitals don't get overwhelmed. But we can't set this up overnight. We got to be able to do 2 things at the same time. And it's hard enough to get seen the government do 1, let alone 2.
And you also write, until a fast, comprehensive testing regime is in place, we cannot end social distancing, which is...
No. We're not coming out of this until, look, it's funny because my next column that I'm writing right now is on what the steps, so we should probably wait for that, but the steps we need to take to get out of this. And we're only talking about some of them. There are many things that have to come into play to get us out of this. And, the testing and the contact tracing and isolation, that's that's part of it. There's so many things that have to happen for us to safely come out of this. And we're barely keeping pace with putting out the fire.
Whose responsibility is it to get these things done? The federal government?
Who? It's a public good.
Yeah. And you say...
And again, we can blame, everybody can finger point whether it should be cities or states or the federal government. But, there is no money at the local level. This is going to cost a fortune. And states cannot run deficits. They cannot print money.
Right.
Only the federal government can.
Right.
So even if this has to be run and implemented at a local level, the only people that can pay for this right now are the federal government.
Yeah, you're right. The federal government,
this
Atlantic piece, the federal government needs to come up with a way to pay for this new workforce as well as for the tests it administers. Our healthcare system usually depends on insurance to pay for tests because the benefit is thought to be for the individual. But then you say testing intervention in this scenario is also for the public good at the order of public health entities. Why is it so expensive, Aaron? The labor, the people?
Well, first of all, I mean, tests cost money, but all this is going to cost labor. I mean, it's like you're going to need a massive infrastructure of people who are going to be able to track people down. And when you tell a group, like when you tell individuals you need to go into isolation for the public good for the next 2 weeks, or even quarantine for the next 2 weeks, who's going to pay for that? You know, people not working, that costs money. So it's like,
is there a difference between
Is
there a difference between isolation and quarantine?
Yes. So quarantine would be like, it's, technical, but when I'm using the terms, quarantining is like, hey, go stay at home. Like if you quarantine me, you put me at home, which means I and my family basically all have to stay home. But that still puts my family at risk. Like they could catch this. Isolation is you take me and you go put me in a hotel, which is specifically full of people who have COVID. So it's like, so that's isolation.
The COVID hotel.
People out. Well, that's what other countries do. That's like what China and Singapore. That's what they're doing.
We're better than them.
They have special facilities. Well, we could do this.
No, we can't.
So
I feel like we can't.
We could.
We don't follow any orders here. We don't want to be told what to do in America.
I get.
I think the biggest problem in this country is our culture, this idea of individualism, this disdain for government, this disdain for expertise. That seems to be a problem that a lot of these other countries don't have. I mean, who else in any other part of the world, Aaron, is watching people, their friends and neighbors in their retirement communities die and still say, oh, this is being overhyped by the media?
Well, not overhyped by the media, but there are other countries that are not moving fast enough. Like there are countries in Europe that are behind the curve, and other countries that are. So it's like, but on the other hand, we see drastic differences state by state here, even in communities.
There are numbers.
I don't know what to say. I don't know. Like this is where it's like I don't know what else to do. I still see a lot of public voices, even who are like, we're still overreacting, and we still should just,
Who is saying that? Like, get them on the show. I want to interview anybody who's saying we're overreacting and have them back that up. I mean,
you can find them on social media.
Well, social media, you can.
It's not hard. No, I mean, but these are not quiet people. They're not, they're not without followers. I don't know. It all just depends on sort of your outlook and everything else too. I mean, there are people who are like, let it burn, so what? 2.2 million people died. Yeah. I don't think that's a good idea, but it's an idea.
If you get the flu, you can't get it again that season until it mutates to a different strain?
Well, theoretically, if there's more than one flu, the thing about flu that's funky is that it has the ability, or I shouldn't say ability because it's not smart or anything. Flu just mutates in such a way that it changes its I want to say viral coat or something in such a way that it your immunity changes. So your immunity to different types of flu is not all equivalent. Like it can mutate. So we almost have to see which strains seem to be predominant this year. We'll make a vaccine to counter that one, and then we go after it. But it's still not perfect because we're doing some prediction, and sometimes the flu mutates and sometimes it changes. That's what makes flu special and bad. Don't get me wrong, bad. But other viruses don't.
So this one
mutate.
What about this one?
Well, it hasn't yet mutated in such a way that we fear it's going to change immunity. It's mutating all the time. Mutations happen. Some mutations are great for us. Like maybe the virus dies faster, or maybe it's not as dangerous. Or some mutations are bad. Maybe some mutations will change immunity. But, you can't just, it's not a guarantee that a mutation is going to change immunity. Most viruses don't do that. So like measles, the vaccine works. You get immune. Chickenpox. You get immune to chickenpox, you're immune. Like you don't get chickenpox more than once. You have usually an immunity issue. But we don't know if, coronavirus, this will turn out to be more like chickenpox or more like the flu. At the moment, we're hoping it turns out more like chickenpox.
You've been good on your Twitter feed to point out the socioeconomic differences here in America and more impoverished areas, how much worse it's going to be or is, as well as in underdeveloped countries. When you see America fucking this up so bad, you got to be concerned about some of these more underdeveloped countries that are going to get hit really hard. I mean, how are you looking at that?
So, okay, look, yeah, it's going to be bad.
Especially
but
in urban areas.
Look, in urban areas, but, again, urban areas might have more, this is the thing. If there's not a lot of inter-village or inter-city or town travel, then you might be okay. Like if you can social distance, that works. Like social distancing works. Like if we could just shut it down for a couple of weeks, truly shut it down, it would see a huge difference.
By the way, is it weird that my wife was enacting social distancing with me years ago?
She was just protecting herself. She was thinking ahead from a pandemic standpoint. Look, this is where it's like, I'm enough of an introvert. This has not been as hard for me as others. I watched some of my Amy once in a while and Sydney, like sometimes would bounce off the walls. And I'm like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, I feel a little. I
can stay at home all day and make meatballs. Yes.
I know. I feel a little bad about the good parts of this, enjoying them as well. I love being home. Let me ask you this one. I've asked tons of people this question, but no experts. And everybody says pretty much the same thing. And I'm the only one not practicing this. When you go to the grocery store, Aaron Carroll.
I do not go to the grocery store.
When someone goes.
No, we don't.
You're having things delivered.
Clickety clack. Yes. This is where Indiana, this is where my area has been spectacular.
Not all of us are rich. So
no, it's not even. Okay, but let's back up. It's not even a rich thing. It's also a capacity thing. Like it's Indiana. Our supermarkets are freaking palaces.
Not all of us have
nothing but space.
Not everybody has a sunroom. Moving on. The question is, do you wipe down and disinfect everything?
No. So what we do is, and also
everybody I've talked to is doing that.
Everything isn't fancy. So no, we have lots of
you just have your butler do it.
No, we sent the butler home. We're social distancing.
Poor Jeeves.
When deliveries come in, we bring them in the house and we put them by the front door and we sort of leave them there for hours. And we go and we'll wash our hands immediately. And the virus immediately starts to degrade. We just leave it there for a while. Then later, we will bring the stuff into the kitchen, unload everything, and immediately wash our hands, put it away, wash our hands. And then when you do food preparation, wash your hands again. This stuff's not going to jump from the package into your mouth. Like if you keep giving it time and washing your hands, you'll be fine. Now, if you want to wipe everything down with wipes, go ahead. It's not going to hurt anybody. And it's probably another layer of protection, but you don't have to do that.
So just leave it there and don't touch it. There
was a great article in the Washington Post by a guy who talked about like doing this and the methods, and it was really good. Like I wish I could remember who wrote it. It was really good.
Okay, so how much longer do you think we have to be staying at home, sheltering in place, and is it regional?
It's the wrong question.
Okay, what you tell me the right question.
Here's the thing. Here we'll tease. The right question is, what do we need to do? How do we get out of this?
Yeah.
Next time, because that's my next column.
Oh, okay. How do we get out of this next time? And you promised to join me when
absolutely.
Where will that be?
Second that's out.
Where?
I hate to say it because you never know. I think at the New York Times.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you've been posting in the New York Times, the Atlantic, and all these prestigious media outlets. The best thing about this horrible situation is how much attention it's brought to experts, especially my favorite one, you.
Oh, you're very kind, but there's
real quick, rattle off the shows that you've been invited on.
I don't know. Lots of shows on MSNBC, Hardball.
Why isn't CNN using you?
I don't know. Go ask your friends at CNN.
I'm going to start a petition. All right.
I've done a bunch of shows at MSNBC. I've done a lot of NPR, some podcast. I did a Slate podcast. I did, John and Hank's podcast. I've done your show, of course, many times. Some local news stuff. A lot of talking to print journalism. I love print journalism, so a lot of talking to them. It's all over.
Without naming them, has anybody been terrible? What's the worst anybody's been?
I don't want to say.
No, you don't have to say their names. Can you be like, one guy was just really, or this person?
You know what? I don't even I'll tell you offline.
Okay.
But I never want to say anything.
Can I then share it at least with my paying subscribers?
Oh, you know what? I will say it with you, and then you make yes. I will guarantee.
Okay. All right, buddy. Thank you as always for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Follow him on Twitter at Aaron E. Carroll, and then you can see where he's appearing. Read him at the Incidental Economist. Listen to his podcast. Listen to and watch on YouTube Healthcare Triage and everything else. Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you, Aaron. Always fascinating. Always great to talk with him. And I go from health to your wealth. I've been doing this a lot with a wide range of doctors, physicians, scientists, and financial, economic advisors, etc. And I know Ron Insana. I don't know how I know Ron. We saw each other recently in MSNBC. We had a mutual respect for each other. We got to talking, and I said, I got to get you on the show. I saw that he'd written this interesting piece at CNBC, and he was just a great, great guest. I really enjoyed my conversation with him, so I hope that you will too. Right now, CNBC's Ron Insana on Stand Up. All right, joining me now, a business journalist, money manager, who you will definitely recognize if you've ever turned on or tuned into CNBC. I've gotten to know him a little, and he's a really nice guy, great sense of humor. He tweets at @Insana. Got a great piece at CNBC.com titled Getting Inspiration from the Greatest Generation's Economic Hardship and Shared Sacrifice. I'm very happy to have the beautiful Ron Insana framed up for me. Nice and tightly on the video right here on Stand Up for the first time, the legend. There he is. Hey, Ron, thank you very much for joining me.
So my brother from another mother there.
Italian bald guys. Should do our own show.
Italian bald guys, yeah.
There you go. Ron, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate this. First of all, I got to ask you, who are you sheltering in place with? What's going on at your home right now?
My wife of almost 25 years now. I've got my 22-year-old daughter who just got hired at a job right before this all happened. So she's working from home. I've got two kids who previously had been in boarding school whose spring semester has now officially been canceled. So they're online doing school from home. So we're all here. We're all getting along. It's actually, you know what? I'll tell you, after going through the experience of having kids in boarding school over the last now 7-8 years, it's great to have everybody home and everybody's getting along, doing well, and taking the proper precautions to stay safe.
Total of 5? Is that what you said? You got 3 kids?
Yeah.
Wow. And any other discoveries outside of actually enjoying your family all under one roof again?
There have been, I think, maybe some challenges on the culinary front because there's a lot of chicken over the course of the last 4 weeks. A lot of chicken and salad, buffalo chicken, chicken patties last night, breaded chicken. And we're doing a lot with chicken. I can say that.
You have a really good piece in CNBC that I mentioned that I want to talk about. But before we get to that, I just want to talk about some of the economic data and stuff that you cover on a regular basis. First of all, how would you explain what's happening in oil markets? There is a war between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and my understanding is that Vladimir Putin wants to put out of business the oil markets here in the U.S., which have taken off because of the technology called fracking. How am I doing so far?
That's exactly right. And in fact, the Saudis and the Russians could not agree on what level of production to maintain over the last couple of months. And the Saudis have done this before as well. If you go back to 1986, when they couldn't maintain discipline within OPEC, when it was a stronger cartel, the Saudis couldn't get everybody to stop cheating and exceeding their production quotas. So in 1986, for instance, they flooded the market with oil, drove the spot price down to $10, which we've again seen now in Midland, Texas. We've seen $4 oil in Canada, which is well below the futures price that we quote on CNBC. The real price of oil is about half of what it looks like. And the Saudis and the Russians are, in fact, trying to hurt the U.S. fracking community because we are now the largest producer of oil in the world. We produce 13 million barrels a day. That's likely going higher if this ever resolves itself. And we're now the swing producer in the world the way Saudi Arabia used to be. And we export more than we ever have since the 1970s. So this is affecting their market share. So they're trying to drive our frackers out of business.
I'm trying to find the president's tweet from today on this. But I think he said he just got off the phone with his good friend. I'm trying to find the exact wording. Mohammed bin Salman, which is a terrible person. He's a terrible person and a horrible person to call a friend, but I'm not surprised.
Agreed.
But in lieu of not, here it is. Just spoke to my friend MBS, Crown Prince. He put Crown Prince in parentheses, which is whatever, of Saudi Arabia, who spoke with President Putin of Russia, and I expect and hope that they will be cutting back approximately 10 million barrels and maybe substantially more, which, if it happens, will be great for the oil and gas industry. Do you want to try to help unpack that tweet from today from the president?
Yeah, listen, I mean, so this is it's funny because the president has expressed the desire for both higher and lower prices. When prices fell, he said that's a boon to the American consumer. It's like a tax cut, which under normal circumstances would be true because you'd see gasoline below $2 a gallon, which on an inflation-adjusted basis is back where it was in the early 1970s. But since we're all sheltering in place, since we're all locked at home, nobody's really driving. So demand for oil around the world is down by about 24 million barrels a day. So nobody's really benefiting from the lower price of crude oil or gasoline. And in the meantime, higher prices would help the U.S. energy industry. So the president seems to want both. You can't have both. And so you have to decide which you want to favor more in the short term. And right now it looks like they're trying to help the industry out. But I don't see why the Saudis and the Russians are going to go along with this. And I think there's some skepticism in the marketplace that such a deal is going to occur.
This has been going on for a few weeks now, too. And I'm not sure what the effect of the overall, global economy in conjunction with the fact that nobody's working has. But I talked with I talked with a guy named Greg Brew about this. I feel like 3 weeks ago, really smart academic down in Texas, SMU. But Ron, I mean, the other thing is in terms of if coronavirus epidemic shutting down the economy wasn't happening, this move by the Russians and Saudis would still have an effect on oil markets in places I read like North Dakota. I mean, and jobs in North Dakota and Texas. And I'm a climate hawk. You should know I'm growing. I'm growing my own stuff, Ron. Okay, I'm crazy for climate.
What that is that you're growing, but
it's simply arugula, Insana. But I think and I don't want the fossil fuels to go away. I don't want us to have them anymore at all. But I do understand that these are real people's jobs. Yeah. How bad is this for the families and workers in the oil fields? Well,
it's potentially quite bad. Right now, it looks like they're not cutting jobs because it's and Dan Yergin, who's an oil industry expert, was speaking on CNBC earlier today. It's actually in some cases more expensive to cap a wellhead than it is to keep it running, even if you're running it at a loss. So it's a capital intensive business. And so every time you shut a well, it costs $100,000 or $200,000. And my colleague Brian Sullivan was pointing that out. So at some point, it's going to hurt. Right now, a lot of these energy companies are also quite heavily levered. They've borrowed a lot of money at junk bond prices, and those loans could go bad, and that could force bankruptcies. In fact, we've seen two already in the industry. Two different energy companies have already filed for bankruptcy. So it's going to hurt real people, absolutely. And under normal circumstances, there would be some trade-off. Again, the consumer would get the benefit, and that's not happening right now. The destruction of demand globally, the slowdown in China, in Europe, and elsewhere is actually dropping demand by about 24 million barrels a day, I think, as I stated before. So this is a very complex process, and it's really, in some ways, both separate from the coronavirus problem and now exacerbating it to a certain extent because we've seen, again, people stay home from work, shelter in place. Airlines are flying at 5 to 15% of capacity. That means the demand for jet fuel, which we used to call kerosene, is actually also down by an extraordinary amount. So there's really almost very limited or almost no demand for crude oil at this point. So they're floating it on barges all over the world. We're fully stocked here in the States. Canada's overflowing. So this is a complex problem that doesn't have any immediate solution. Even if they cut by 10 million barrels a day, there's still a 14 million barrel per day gap between supply and demand.
Well explained, sir. Very good. All right, let me move on to another issue. We go from oil markets to, you've been tweeting a lot about China, their economy. Can you recap this number of tweets that you have about, why China is, what's going on there in terms of their economy and why it matters?
Well, it certainly stopped on a dime when they were in lockdown for coronavirus. Now, it appears that they're coming back online. We don't know in Wuhan and Hubei province more broadly whether everybody's literally going back to work or they're taking Muslims who are interred in those so-called re-education camps and forcing them to go into the factories and start producing things again. But we've heard from some CEOs that business is beginning to pick up in China. But they've had a huge contraction in growth in the first quarter, which bled around the world. It hurt Europe. Germany's a huge exporter to China, to an extent we are. And so it's had an enormous impact on the global economy. And now with Europe in lockdown and the U.S. in lockdown, we've got this kind of circle of pain that's going around the world and affecting economies everywhere.
Is that your email that I keep hearing blip?
Yeah, as well as my wife's email that you yeah.
She gets a lot of email. Very popular.
More than I do, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So, and the other thing is that you were tweeting about in terms of China is you said, why do we see them as an economic threat, something to that effect?
An existential threat. So, the Trump administration, the guys like Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, Bob Lighthizer.
Oh, great guys. That's
great guys. Really fun to party with type guys who have, and look, I don't mind in a certain respect. It's okay to vilify China. They've broken a lot of rules. They have no respect for human rights. They do things like put 1 million people in re-education camps because they're Muslim. I don't look up to them as a model for an economy or a society from the governmental level. Love the Chinese people. But the administration, since before it came into office as a campaign, had suggested that China represents an existential economic and military threat to the United States. And I think in some ways in the short run that's true. And the president focused almost entirely on the numerical trade deficit we have with them. And there were some concerns about them building up their military. But at the end of the day, they have such an unbalanced economy. They have excess capacity in almost every industry, 55 million homes that are unoccupied. Even the low-income housing that they build for poor people is so bad, poor people won't take it. When you look at, everything that they do from this kind of Orwellian surveillance state, this huge clampdown on human rights, you can't imagine that they are going to, in the future, be strong. And they're also more heavily indebted than the United States. Their debt to GDP ratio is 300%. So at some juncture, they're going to run into a problem like Japan did in 1989 or the way the Soviet Union came apart. I just don't think they're as strong as everybody believes them to be. And I think they're ultimately vulnerable. And we saw this during their portion of the coronavirus crisis, that they can shut down just as easily as anybody else.
When you say you don't think they're as strong as a lot of people, where does that put you in your world of analysts? Does that make you a minority, or do most?
Yeah. I mean, I think people are still worried about this, long-term economic and military threat coming from China. Look, they do have quite a bit of cash on hand, if you will, $3 trillion in foreign exchange reserves. And, they hold $1 trillion worth of U.S. treasuries. I just don't think the model that they've created of state-run capitalism, which is really a communist capitalist hybrid, is going to work terribly well in the long run. Particularly the more you clamp down on your people, the less productive they become, and the more problems you're going to run into from an economic perspective and a social perspective. And so I just don't think that this, kind of command and control environment that they have is going to lead to global dominance any more than the Soviet Union.
All right, we go from oil markets to the Chinese economy to let's talk about our economy. Tomorrow is we're talking on Thursday, the 2nd of April. So Friday, tomorrow is the 3rd, and more importantly, it's the first Friday of the month, and we're going to get job numbers out. But I'm seeing reports like pay no attention to Friday's job numbers. What do you anticipate, and what do we need to know about March's job numbers? How should we look at it when they come out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics tomorrow?
Well, the survey that was taken actually started before we really went deeply into lockdown and before these layoffs and furloughs that we've seen. So right now, what we call high-frequency data, the data that we get relatively quickly and in real time, like jobless claims this morning, topped 6.6 million new jobless claims in addition to the 3.3 million we saw last week. So that's in 2 weeks, 10 million people have applied for unemployment insurance benefits. That is more than 10 times the biggest number we've ever seen in the past. If you go back to 1982, the prior high, excluding last week, was 695,000 claims in a single week. So we're at 10x that number, which implies, not tomorrow because it's not going to be reflected in the numbers, but in April and beyond, a huge jump in unemployment, probably into double digits. And it also implies a huge drop in economic growth in the second quarter. And people have estimated anywhere from -10 to -30% in the April to June period.
Well, getting to your piece in a moment here about getting inspiration from the greatest generation's economic hardship, Ron, I mean, How do you see this right now? I feel like any prediction it's hard to be accurate right now, but I've heard one thing I heard was it'll be more like a V shape recession than a U shape, but it looks like it's going to be a depression regardless. But is it short lived? Do we bounce back quickly? I mean, I feel like this. Based on the science and experts I'm reading, this virus could go away for a minute and come back ferociously in the fall, like the flu season runs. How do you see this affecting the economy?
Well, that's where we always talk about in our business being data dependent. We're usually talking about economic numbers. Now we're talking about virus numbers. We're talking about the number of infected. We're talking about the mortality rate. We're talking about the possibility of that second surge that you alluded to in the fall. The longer the virus lingers, the more people we see fall ill and sadly, pass, the deeper the economic contraction and the slower people will be to re-normalize, if that's even possible, their lives. And how quickly are you going to get on a plane? How quickly will you go to a movie theater? How quickly will you go to Broadway shows? How quickly will you have big parties with a lot of people at your house? Normalcy or normality is going to be a key question as well as to how quickly we rebound. I'm thinking it's more of a W recovery where we're going to go in waves. That this V shape is optimistic, that suddenly, unless we find a therapeutic that absolutely cures almost anyone and everyone who gets the illness, and we're still a year or so away from a vaccine, until that point comes, we have to be pretty darn sure that we're going to go back into the office comfortably or do anything in large groups that will make us feel safe. And so I not only think there's a short-term issue here, but we're already now seeing that there are some issues that could be longer term. Do we work from home 2 or 3 days a week and go into the office sporadically or on some sort of staggered schedule? Do we travel differently? Do we drive more instead of fly more? Do we do things that are literally more socially distant on a regular basis?
Ron, how much have you seriously thought about there being scary or potentially dangerous disruptions, whether it be in local economy or overall in terms of food, energy, and water? Do you see any of that stuff? I mean, as bad
as our response has been from a governmental perspective to this virus, we are the largest producer of food in the world. I mean, we can feed the world many times over. Just some raw statistics for things that, you kind of don't think about every day. We have 3.5 billion pounds of meat in cold storage. We have 1.5 billion pounds of cheese in cold storage. We have
your family has like
we have about 1 billion of that.
Chicken.
Just for the meatballs and the sausage alone. I mean, that's kind of how it goes on Sunday. But we are well stocked as a society, and you see this, right? I mean, you look at Kroger, you look at all the grocery stores who are reporting 50 to 100% increases in sales. I mean, we're a little short on toilet paper, but generally speaking, food and water, we're fine. We're not, the places that are really going to get hit in that regard are Africa and other emerging market nations that may not have the types of surpluses that we certainly don't have the surpluses that we enjoy, and they may strain at the bit. They're also living in close quarters, particularly those individuals who've run away from civil wars. They're in that regard for just the basic necessities of life.
Yeah, good of you to bring that up.
Vulnerable.
Yeah. All right, let's. Your piece at CNBC is really good. It's titled "Getting Inspiration from the Greatest Generations: Economic Hardship and Shared Sacrifice." You open it by saying, "There's a meme going around the internet pointing out, quote, your grandparents were called to war. You're being called to sit on your couch. You can do this. Can we?"
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and we should. I mean, to resist this is pure folly. I mean, we're literally, and with the technology that we have. And I know social distancing is uncomfortable. I know look, I've got a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 22-year-old. They're not enjoying really any of this, except that my son, my 18-year-old, can play Fortnite with his friends from home and still have a social experience. They have now their I wouldn't say their FaceTime happy hours, but at least they can, congregate as groups and talk online. Yeah, we can do this. I mean, I point out, it wasn't my grandparents. It was actually my parents who lived through that experience of the Depression, World War II, and a host of other, events that occurred thereafter, the atomic age, the Cold War, and all of that. And my dad served in World War II. The group of gentlemen in basic training who were doing one of the live fire drills, where they crawl under barbed wires with machine guns being shot over their head with real bullets, The line of guys that were in front of my dad got wiped out in basic training because the machine guns were pointed too low. My dad got pneumonia in basic. He didn't ship out. His unit did, and they got killed the first day they were overseas.
Jesus.
My mom was a riveter in a war plant, believe it or not, with her cousin Rose, who was not the prototype for Rosie the Riveter, but one of them riveted the other's dress to an airplane at one junction. I mean, look, they were rationing food, they were rationing gasoline. In states that bordered on either ocean, people were turning their lights off at night. There were hard curfews because they were worried that the Japanese or the Germans were going to attack us on either shore. We are being asked to stay home and watch Netflix. It's just not that big a deal.
I read this article and I actually disagree with you a little bit on it because I mean that your parents' generation, that generation, our parents' generation, was different. Things were different. It was a different battle, and of course we should be able to unify. And I think other countries and nations and societies will do better than us. But America, you can say whatever you want about it, but I think it's terrible in that this idea of this individualism and this rugged individualism and this disdain and lack of respect for both government and experts is proving in a number of states. And it's crazy that it's a liberal conservative divide. It's just insane that somehow we see illness and death differently. I fear that we can't do almost anything together, even sit on our couch anymore.
Well, I don't disagree with you on that point. I'm saying that we should be able to. I mean, the fact that we view this as a sacrifice relative to what prior generations have gone through. My grandfather did survive World War I. I mean, granted, he was a musician, so he got to play in the band, but they also got hit with the flu. He had cholera, in the early 1900s. And they did effectively, even if they didn't want to, they did whatever it took. I mean, I can't say that my father enjoyed his time in the Army, even though he ended up stateside for the entire time. People were going over, friends were getting killed, and we saw this all the way really through Vietnam, and then again through the wars we've experienced recently. And that has not been a shared sacrifice. I mean, given the way we've restructured our military, we can almost have wars without anyone in the civilian population worrying about their kids being called to action. And so that life has changed dramatically. I mean, whether you enlisted or you got drafted in World War II, everybody was at risk in some way or another.
And there were and there was an actual cost. There was war tax. There was there was what's it called, rationing of salaries for even.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, and listen, gasoline and food, and scrap drives, and if you had an old tire, you'd bring it into the rubber drive so that they could make support for Jeeps and tanks and things like that. So it was a wildly different environment, but people did get behind it. And again, I'm just struck by the difference in what we're being asked to do. I
think there's also, and the obvious elephant in the room is our country's leader is a conspiracy theorist and a hack, and he's evil, and he doesn't care about people, and he's put profits before people, and he's more worried about the economy than he is the health of America, but which of course is stupid too, because they're intertwined. And this idea of sending people back to work would hurt the economy that much more. So we don't have a leader that is asking us to make a sacrifice, much less inspiring us to do it. That's a huge difference as well.
He certainly fought the notion of sheltering in place or staying still or doing any of those things early on. And only recently has he come around to trying to, use larger numbers of potential deaths from 100 to 240,000 Americans to freeze us in place. And again, this is coming more from his science advisors than his economic advisors. And so there's an enormous disconnect in the White House itself as to the projected severity of the disease, how we should deal with it. If you saw Bill Gates or on CNN, I don't usually tout on other networks, but a fascinating interview last week, and then an op-ed piece that he's written recently, he's talking about a national lockdown till the end of May. He's talking about the necessity, I should say, of our staying home and letting this thing run its course and letting science and business find some therapeutics that can stop this thing dead in its tracks and take the economic hit up front so that the longer run, we'd be in better shape.
Last question. What do you make of what Congress has passed so far in terms of stimulus and checks, and how much more of that there's going to need to be? And is it endless? Is it an endless stream of money that they can keep handing out?
Well, normally I would say no. But when you look at what's happening to the economy and the lost wages, the lost production, there is not a single final auto assembly plant in the United States that is currently open. Restaurants have shut doors, except in some instances for takeout and delivery. Airlines are operating at 15% of capacity. Auto sales have fallen 30% in a month. Auto dealerships are closed around the country. So unlike other programs where we've seen stimulus or tax cuts, they're filling a hole here. The public sector is absorbing, again, private sector losses. But unlike 2008, when they were propping up the banks, they're now propping up businesses and individuals. So I think they're doing largely the right things. There are always going to be some things that you don't like. And we've never seen a bill of this size, $2.2 trillion. Plus, the bill gives the Federal Reserve the ability to lend $4.5 trillion out into the real economy. Unprecedented in both measures. So I think they're doing the right thing. And yes, I think there's going to be more. There's some discussion. Nancy Pelosi wants to lift the cap on state and local taxes, the deductions that you normally get, return them to what we saw before the 2017 Tax Act. The president wants to see more generous write-offs for what we call travel and entertainment that would help the hospitality and restaurant business if you can write off those expenses, if indeed we start going back out to lunch on a regular basis. Yeah, there's more to come. And I do think they're doing the right thing. There are going to be elements of it that will be abused. There are going to be elements of it that are ambitious and may not work. But this is a whatever it takes moment, and you have to do it.
Yeah, well, it would be great if we had better leadership, but I'm glad that we have great analysts like you that are writing things like this at CNBC. We do have to come together. We do have to depend on each other, regardless of your background, regardless of your situation. We are in this together. And Ron, it's great to talk to you. Great stuff.
It's a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, really.
Do me a favor and come on Fireside Chats, which is my show on Facebook.
Anytime you want, sir.
I'm going to be shooting that soon.
I look forward to that. And I wish I could touch your face, but you can't even touch your own face.
I even shaved for this too. So.
Oh wow! You went above and beyond. You put on a shirt and everything.
Put on a shirt. Yeah, I was in sweats and a black T-shirt.
Watch Ron on CNBC. Read his piece at CNBC.com. Follow him on Twitter at @Insana. Thank you very much, Ron. Great stuff. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Ron Insana. Watch him on CNBC. Read him at CNBC.com. Follow him on Twitter at @Insana. Really cool, nice guy. Obviously. Very intelligent and a great communicator. Definitely want to get him back on. Let me know what you thought. And finally today, I've got Christian Finnegan to wrap up the week. I'm trying to convince him to join me every Friday episode. We had a great chat. We were all over the place. I love this guy. I think he's hilarious. I think he's thoughtful and thought-provoking. I always love talking to him. I did have a little audio issue, a little crackling at times, and I'm sorry about that. I worked really hard to get rid of it, and it was really frustrating. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it out. Just comes and goes at different times on a Skype connection. Hopefully, it's tolerable because I thought the conversation was really good. I just didn't want to edit it out. Here it is right now, Christian Finnegan. And joining me right now is one of my all-time favorite comedians and people. I really like him. I'm psyched to have him joining me. We're going to kind of wrap up the week and catch up. Ladies and gentlemen, very, very funny comedian. You should buy all of his albums, 4 of which exist on iTunes or wherever you get them. His most recent album is 60% Joking. He tweets at Christ Finnegan, and I am looking at him right now on Skype. He is somewhere in the woods. Christian Finnegan, everybody. Hey, man.
Hi, Peter.
Do you like that royalty-free music? I know you're a music.
It definitely was a royalty-free jam. It was also an enjoyment-free jam, which, no, it's, I mean, I can respect people who make royalty-free music. You know, not everything has to be a passion project, but there is just a real sameness, like even across genres, like whether it's like royalty-free rock or royalty-free hip-hop. It's like when you go to Panera Bread and everything tastes like Panera Bread, no matter what you get. You know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean because I don't get the music end of it, but I do know what you mean with the Panera Bread thing.
There's just a taste, yeah, even though you could get a Cuban sandwich or you could get, you know, a muffin, and it all has a Panera Bread taste to it.
If you say so. I haven't. I'm gonna now. I mean, listen. Now that's in my head. Now everybody that heard you say that is gonna feel that way, even if they didn't, about Panera. And by the way, there goes today's sponsor, Panera, where everything tastes the same.
I am a big supporter. I go to Panera Bread, when we're allowed out into the world of the living, probably at least twice a week. There's a Panera 150 yards from my front door. And I always say that Panera Bread is the fanciest place that you can feel comfortable eating while wearing gym clothes. You can't get any fancier.
Well said.
While wearing a mesh undercarriage.
Well said, sir. All right, we have a lot of things that I want to talk about today. We're kind of recapping the week. I'm going to try to force you to do this with me every Friday if possible, if you're available. And I mean, let's be honest, we're available. And I wanted to start with that conversation, the future of live performance. It's, after I lost my job, I slowly started to get booked and get back out there on the stand-up and speaking circuit. And all of that got wiped away with this. But I felt like I didn't feel as bad because I wasn't alone. The biggest top-selling comedians and musicians, everybody lost their gigs. And there is a weird sense of not solidarity, but what's the opposite of isolation?
Yeah, that you're going through something together, sort of a mass forbearance. I don't know.
Yeah, the shared experience that makes it. Oh, okay. A mass forbearance. Well, anyway, I mean, what do you think about the future of live performance after this? And, or even before that, how are artists, even ones, that are doing pretty well, you're going to burn through your savings?
I mean, it's
how does anybody survive this artist gig worker?
My wife owns a performance venue and I am a performer. So we're both in the public gathering business. And when people talk about, when we get through this, we're all going to, go back to work and the economy will restart. It's like time things fully get back to quote unquote normal. The only people who are going to be able to afford to own venues are like Live Nation and these massive conglomerates. I'm sure that not to call the improv chain a massive conglomerate, but in the stand-up comedy world, it is. Yeah. I'm sure the improv chain will find a way to make it through this. Will the local comedy club, the B room in your town, will the independently owned club, will they be able to hold out? I'm much more concerned about that. And I'm also concerned for comedians that once we all get back out there, everybody is going to be clamoring for spots. And a lot of the comedians, Roy Wood Jr. had a thread on Twitter that was rather harrowing about this a couple weeks ago, just about how we all have to accept that we're going to be taking lumps as performers, that all the comedians who will be doing theaters are not going to be back doing clubs. All the comedians who are headlining clubs are not going to be featuring. Like everybody's going to get kind of bumped down a notch.
Why is that?
Well, just because, first of all, I don't think a lot of those massive theaters will be packing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could see comedy clubs reopening, but I could see people being like, all right, well, I'll go to my local comedy club where it's 100 people in a room, but I'm not going to go to the giant 1,200 seater. I'm not going to be there. I could see that happening.
Because you don't want to be in as densely populated places. There's going
to be a psychological desire to avoid giant crowds,
especially because this is going to go on for at least a year. I mean, this virus is not going to be vaccinated against by the autumn, when it's going to, experts are predicting it's probably going to be back. So it's I mean, from a personal, I'm not so worried about getting it. I figure that, half of us are going to get it eventually. I just don't want to get it while the hospitals are full. Right.
You know what I mean? Like that to me is more of the concern. I mean, I don't think that we can live like, trolls forever. Eventually, we are going to have to re-engage in society.
Hey, psst, I'm doing a pretty good job. I don't hate it.
But, there is a certain amount of guilt to that, every time you find yourself kind of enjoying this, and then you'll open up Twitter and you'll find out that somebody's dad died.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And, it reminds me of if you've
That's why
ever,
I whispered it.
Huh?
That's why I whispered it, because it's.
I think it's a feeling that I think a lot. Sorry, we're kind of changing topics slightly.
It's okay.
If you don't mind.
No.
But that's for people who've lost a family member in the past. It reminds me of that, where, grief takes on all sorts of weird forms. And one of the forms that I have experienced in my own personal life is that you're not necessarily, crying or feeling horribly tragic all the time, but anytime you laugh about anything or experience joy or pleasure, there's that recoil of like, what are you doing? Things are bad. Like, how dare you enjoy yourself right now? And I think that as these next few weeks are going to be pretty brutal.
Yeah, because the next 2 weeks statistically, the fatality rate is predicted to go way up. That's what you mean.
Yeah, and that there's going to be that slow and steady trickle of names. A jazz musician, a political activist from the 80s, your friend's mom, just random. You're just going to constantly have this trickle down effect of just this person passed away and this person passed away, and it's
It's going to take a toll on our psyche, on our yeah. But I don't think But just going back to what you said, in terms of not wanting to get it when it's at peak capacity, when the hospitals are filled, because you don't get as much. I mean, like, that's I don't want to be in the hospital in Central Park that they just had to build. That wouldn't probably be my situation, because I don't live in the city. But
I don't want to be getting like an IV drip in the back room of like a Build-A-Bear somewhere. I'd like to be in an actual medical facility.
Well, the Build-A-Bear's got to find a way to pay the rent. But I also, this has been my mantra for the past few days. As long as I don't have that monster, it's a good day. Like, the idea that this illness, which is really bad in the way that it kills you, and most importantly, that you can't be close to the people you love, like, that is giving me a sense of gratefulness that I didn't have when I was going through the worst part of my depression, losing my job, or anything else in my life where I was struggling. So I see what you're saying by not wanting to, be filled with joy and laughter and happiness when all this is happening. But on the flip side of this is every day that you don't wake up with a fever and that you don't have this illness is another good day.
Of course. I mean, I definitely have a sense of gratitude every day that I haven't had on a day-to-day basis a year ago. I think we've all had that feeling of peaks and valleys emotionally, and also of I hate when people say, the important things in life, but it's true.
I just touched my face. I just realized I touched my face while you're talking. Sorry.
You're home. You've washed your hands.
Well, my neighbor is really paranoid. The other day he said he went over to get a ball across the street, and he touched the guardrail and went in and washed his hands. I was like, what? It's not guardrail? A guardrail on the side of a suburban road? Come on.
You're right. Unless literally a person was running their hand across it,
licking it. I mean, like, how cautious have you been? When you bring groceries home, do you scrub them down?
Yes.
I'm the only one I know that's not doing that. Everybody I know does that.
I'm sorry?
Everybody I've asked does that.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a video on YouTube from an ER doctor where he kind of shows you how they basically he shows you how to take care of your groceries and take out food, where you have like a clean side and a dirty side, and you put all of your groceries on the dirty side. Like you even divide a table with like a piece of tape, and have like the dirty side, and take one grocery at a time and wipe it down, move it to the clean side, and then, and then clean the dirty side of the table. I mean, it sounds absurd, but every day we're hearing about that the times that it stays on surfaces are longer than formerly thought, that the aerosolized nature of it, is it airborne? So my opinion is I'm certainly not going to be a scold for anybody who wants to be a little bit insane about it.
Oh no, I'm not being a scold. I'm just it's
the opposite of a scold.
it's a matter of like, how insane do you let it? There are rational things to do. I mean, I'm going on the the extreme with that guardrail suggestion. Like that seemed too much. He's saying, "Oh, my hands are cracking from washing it so much." I'm like, you haven't been out. You haven't gone
you're
anywhere.
right. If you're in your house, there's no reason to constantly be washing your hands. Yeah, and you're right. There's certainly an edge to it. We had an Amazon package delivered yesterday, and my wife took the package.
Made out with the delivery man.
Well, duh.
Thank you, sir.
She gave him a handy. But
well, I think that's fine. I think that's actually okay.
She wore a glove. She wore a glove. That's the important thing. But she forgot to immediately wash her hands after she took the package. And like 3 hours later, she's like, I didn't wash my hands. It's like, okay, that.
My daughter did the same thing. And I don't mean give a hand job to the delivery man. My daughter goes out. The guy, UPS drops a package off. My 12-year-old goes out and gets the package and takes it inside. And I started yelling at her, which is so like foreign for me to be so upset, like yelling at her. And then I ended up just hitting her with the package. No, but it was just a weird thing to be upset about. All right, let me ask you another question, Christian. You sent me the story about the guns, and I'm so glad that this is one that we can talk about from this week. 3.7 million gun background checks in March. I gotta tell you, there's a gun store right near our favorite pizza place, and about it was before we all went isolated. I walked in to find out, like, I don't know what the rules are in New York State. I'm like, I think you can just buy a shotgun. And first of all, if you've never been in a gun store, go. It's a fascinating thing to do. And second of all, what you'll find out is that everybody in that gun store is overwhelmingly helpful in terms of the customer service. I just was asking the guy behind the counter a question, and everybody there wanted to share information and tell me everything they could about how to buy a gun. But what is your take? I mean, you're not a gun guy, I don't think.
No, I'm the opposite of a gun guy. And first of all, the thing about everybody being helpful, a couple things to that.
Go ahead.
I think that the people who work there are trying to counteract the sort of narrative by like, look how professional and responsible and safety conscious we are. But also the people who are there who are offering their advice. One, anytime you know a lot about a dumb topic, you're desperate to share it with people. Like my wife and I bought this little house in upstate New York, and, we had to learn things about whatever, landscaping and things like that. And all this information that you never thought you'd have to know. And then it just takes up space in your brain. So when it comes up, there's like I know about this. I can, When my wife opened QED.Astoria.com, currently closed, but eventually hopefully will open, we had to get food safety licenses, even though it's not a restaurant. Right. And you have to take this ridiculously, absurdly long course. You have to learn about like what temperature shelled eggs can be at and crap like that. And so now when those topics come up, I am sort of desperate to jump in because I have this useless information that I want to share. Also, I think that people who are gun people, there's nothing they love more than turning a liberal. do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, now I get. Yeah, I've got the analogy for it. It's like a gay guy turning me to have sex with him. It's the same triumph.
Well, and it's like it's a justification of their own lifestyle choices, and that's where maybe it diverges from being gay. But this is a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that very.
And
good
I
point.
will admit that it's like a lot of my reticence. I mean, a lot of my reticence to get a gun is because I don't want one in the house because I'm worried that.
More likely to have an accident than
yes,
or put it in your
without
mouth.
Getting more specific than that, I'm worried I'd use it on myself.
But, that's a fine concern. I was thinking if I ever got one, I'd have my wife know where the bullets are.
Right.
And I know where the gun is, and but then you can always buy bullets, so it's kind of stupid.
True, that's true. So you definitely want to be the one with the gun in that situation.
That's a great point. That's a dumb.
But also, I will admit that a lot of the reason that I kind of poo-poo it is that. No, I'm not going to be one of you people. I refuse to be on the same side as you in even the most minimal sense. And half the reason that I feel like I might need a gun is because of you, or not even half, 90% of the reason I feel like I might need a gun is because of the people in this fucking store. And so why would I want to then give them money?
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the crazies, there's a lot of crazy conspiracy stuff this week, and I want to talk about that as well. I mean, first of all, we found out that Dr. Fauci, who's become a national hero to most people, and he's been around, for a long time. He's not a political guy, but I anybody who's critical of him, by the way, for not being more critical of Trump or for, trying to cover for Trump. I think they're missing the point. Fauci knows he needs to be there, and he can't cross the president, or the president will fire him. And you got to keep some scientists, adults in the room. So I'm not critical of him for that.
Yeah, he's
but
an untenable position. I mean, what do you want him to do? Like rip the microphone out of Trump's hand, and then immediately be cast aside and not be able to share the information that he has? I mean, yeah, you can't give him flack for what Trump does.
Right, exactly. So, but the point of bringing him up is we learned this week that there's been a whole bunch of death threats against him. And who are these people, Christian? Who?
Oh, you know who they are. Come on. You know who they are.
But I
They're
don't.
The Caesar Sayaks of the world.
Right, Caesar Sayak, the guy with the van.
The mail bomb. Yeah.
The mail bomber, yeah. Yeah, I guess, but like, do we know them? Who are they listening to? What is the thing about Fauci that they're so mad about that they would threaten him? It's so hard. I get frustrated when I can't understand people, especially extremists. This is a tough one. And granted, I'm not listening to Alex Jones or Hannity or Rush Limbaugh. And yes, I put them all in the same category because they're all conspiracy theorists. But what is this death threats against Dr. Anthony Fauci? What kind of a person?
Because one, there's always been a section of American society that has had a fundamental distrust of expertise in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And that has only been, tripled in the Trump era. And when reality bumps up against narrative, we're at a point where narrative wins, for 44% of the country, is that they start with the narrative that Trump has to be successful and that Trump has this thing that they've all sold their soul for, that they've sort of bought into, has to work out. It has to. And facts must all flow from that it can't all have been for nothing. Trump can't lose. And it's not for Trump. It's not because they're defending Trump. It's because they're defending themselves. They can't handle their Facebook wall being dominated by people telling them they were wrong in 2016. And so therefore, if Trump is always right and what Fauci is saying is making Trump's presidency less successful, if he's saying that we need to stay in our houses longer than Trump needs to, then he is undermining Trump, which means he is undermining me.
Yeah,
that's the way I look at it.
It's definitely one example of it, and it's sad because that's just all about ego, and we should, it's hard to be wrong about anything, and I understand why that's difficult, but when it comes to things like this, life and death, and here's another one. Conspiracy theorist, train engineer, says he crashed in an attempt to attack a Navy hospital ship in Los Angeles. Everybody's reporting this, but here's NPR. A train engineer told police in Los Angeles that he intentionally crashed his locomotive at high speed near the USNS Mercy hospital ship in what seems to be a bizarre attempt to expose a perceived conspiracy. His name is Eduardo Moreno, said he doesn't believe the ship is what they say it's for.
Yeah, I read that article, and they don't specifically say out loud what this dude thinks the ship is for, and that's probably for the best. I mean, you don't want to amplify conspiracy theories,
right.
And put them out into the general airspace. But you can take a guess at what he imagines that it's. I don't know. It's a boat. I'm sure there's a pizza-related pedophile ring in there somewhere. I'm sure that it's something about patriots being hoarded up and rounded into pens. I mean, who the hell knows? But what I found hilarious is that the train, once it derailed, it ended up 250 yards from the ship.
He missed.
So
luckily,
well, he missed. But I was just like, how close could a train get to a ship anyway? You know what I mean? Like, it's not as if the train tracks run like parallel to the water's edge. But it's so sad that you would be so committed to doing this because of some crazy belief in that you would
give up your freedom, your job, your career, your family, and potentially your life. It's just, I just have, it's very sad that the guy was so, maybe he's mentally ill, but maybe he's just paranoid, either way.
People need something, on a spiritual level. People need to believe that there is a big enemy out there. There's a romance to it, in the same way that joining ISIS has a romance to it.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Or starting one of those Keira Knightley stan accounts on Twitter has some romance to it. Like I'm just saying that there's a romance to sort of giving yourself to a cause that you perceive to be bigger than yourself, whether that is ramming a train into the side of a ship to ruin the deep state, or becoming obsessed with some celebrity that your life then becomes about their deification or whatever. There's sort of this, everybody wants to be a righteous soldier on some level.
Well, a lot of people do. Too many.
Yeah. Not everyone. I say everybody.
I mostly want to stay at home right now. And eat potato skins from TGIF, the frozen ones. I make them. Anyway, another crazy story from this week is all of these mega churches looking for what they call religious liberty exemptions. You saw Jerry Falwell's Liberty University bring students back to school at the peak of this.
I don't love it, but
yeah, you've seen some of these crazy right-wing pastors railing against the rules of congregating. And now this.
Because this is them shutting off the gravy train. That these people come into these churches and they're not sure. There's a mass, there's a service, but there's also a collection.
Yeah, but that's such like penny wise and pound foolish. The gravy train is going to end anyway, because when these people all come to church, they're going to share the virus and die. And so you got to play the long game, mega church.
You'd think, but I'm sure that they think, we'll have a few old people will pass away, and those people will be in grief, and they'll need the spiritual guidance that only I can provide.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Insane. That story's crazy. All these religious fanatics. I mean, I understand the idea of missing church and missing that community, but you can do it online. I mean, these online communities, I've got mine. Everybody has one. A lot of people do. Being a member of one is cool. It's fun. I get this, everything that comes along with it, and you can do it for a few weeks or months. Just online, people, for God's sake.
I'm fully expecting this social distancing thing not to be too negative, but I don't expect the center to hold forever. I just think that there's going to come a point a month from now, 5 weeks from now, whatever, where people are just like, fuck this. I just hope that we can keep it together long enough to get through the darkest period before people just throw up their hands and say, screw it, I'm going outside. That will happen eventually. We're not,
this is why leadership matters.
South Korea,
we're exactly. Not, yeah. We're not nearly as science-based either. We just don't have the type of leadership that matters, I think it's fair to say.
There's positive and negative aspects to it. I mean, there is a fundamental Americanness to the idea of, king of the road. I'm my own master. I do what I want. We're not trained as Americans to think of collective action. In fact, we're trained to be skeptical of it. We're trained to think of individual. Of course it's a problem. Yeah. Of course it's a problem. But it is in our cultural DNA, and I don't think that's going to change just because of this.
Of course, the most outrageous story of the week, in my opinion, was from Thursday morning, I think, when the governor of Georgia, who cheated to win that race against Stacey Abrams, announced that he'd be shutting down, I guess, the state, and that they had just found out that people don't necessarily show symptoms at the beginning. And it was a crazy admission because the entire internet exploded with, all of us have known that. Yeah. You just had to read a little bit of news to know that the main problem and main difference between, say, this virus and many others that are at worst, like Ebola, that you don't show symptoms, and that's why it gets passed around, because you don't know that you're sick. That's the biggest, most important thing that everybody knows. You don't have to have a college degree. All you have to do is be literate, and you don't even have to be literate. You could have just heard that from somebody. For the governor of Georgia to say that this morning, the governor of the state where the CDC is in, to say that, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? What if anything, is the backlash against the governor there?
Well, first of all, it's not admission. He knew it.
You think?
Yes, 100%. 100%. I'm not a governor of the state, and I know this. I knew this in February. Early February, I'd heard this. Even
I was
when it was
giving him the
still in
benefit
China,
of the doubt. I was
this.
like, how could you be that stupid to say that out loud? That's the game?
Because there comes a point where facts overwhelm your narrative, and he's given with two choices here. I either have to say, one, that I was not aware of this fact, and now I'm aware of it, and I'm taking decisive action based on this new information. Or B, I knew of this information, I crossed my fingers and hoped that everybody was wrong, or I hoped that it would all stay in liberal New York City and not get down to us, and I lost my bet. Those, and one of them, the first, as dumb as and as ridiculous, we're all pulling our hair out of how absurd it is.
Hey,
is something you can get out without your gag reflex being triggered.
Yeah.
Whereas the second one, you can't.
Right. That's an interesting, I guess probably that's the most obvious answer, because how otherwise could it be stupid? And then we saw David Letterman's name was trending, and it's because the interpreter or the sign language, you know this,
yes.
what's the official name? Sign language
interpreter.
Looked exactly like David Letterman with the beard, and that's the guy that was at that press conference behind the governor looked like Letterman, and that's why David Letterman's name was trending on Thursday.
Yeah,
hilarious.
I mean, people are looking for a little levity.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And he was a rather fashionable ASL interpreter. He's like dressed all in black. He looked kind of cool, honestly. But people who haven't seen ASL interpreters, my wife's parents are both deaf, and so she grew up in deaf culture, and so I'm very. Whenever an ASL interpreter sort of bubbles up into the news, there are all these people sort of reacting to like, what a character, not realizing that pretty much all ASL is. There's a certain quality, there's a dramatic, a theatrical quality
to
ASL.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Well, because you have to, we have 10 different words to say whatever we want to say in English language. There's much fewer words in ASL. And so a lot of ASL is done with facial expressions and, the bigness of gestures. Like if you're saying something is, like I could say, if you said to me like, hey, do you want to grab pizza tonight? I could say, whatever. Or I could say, whatever. And we know that those are two very different responses. And so with ASL, you kind of have to do that with like, reacting to something very small or like making a big gesture.
Sure.
So it's a very fascinating culture once you're sort of exposed to it. But
I'm glad I asked you
every
about
time
that.
there's an ASL interpreter in the news, it's because they always feel like this guy's crazy.
And what else this week? Have you been watching the Trump press conferences at all? I don't know that they're happening. I'm not paying. And then I go on Twitter and I see everybody's watching them. I'm like, why are you people watching these? It's torture.
Yeah. I mean, I follow a few people who document them. And so I only see sort of the clips that bubble up because why?
Yeah, exactly. All right. What else from the week? Just everything else is going so undercovered. I think one of the most undercovered stories of the week, and everything is rightfully undercovered, is that the Trump administration rolled back the regulations, the Obama administration regulations on cafe standards so we could pollute more. It's the biggest undercovered story of the week in my mind. There's a lot of things that are happening and people that are being exploited. In this case, it's the environment. But I think that the other really undercovered idea is that the most vulnerable populations are not being reported on. Prison populations, lower income communities. These are the people who are getting hit the hardest, and these are the people that the media and generally the general American public in this case just doesn't care as much about, and that sucks, of course.
No, of course. I mean, and again, I hate to filter everything through my wife's life, but her dad, who's deaf, is also in jail for attempted murder, as you know.
Yeah, it's
and
a
so
fascinating
we're following
story that your
the
wife has
prison
written.
situation very. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said it's a fascinating story that your wife has written all about. I'm obsessed
it's
with
nuts.
it.
Yeah, her life is sort of the straight flush of family drama. I've got like 2 pair at best.
Yeah.
But she, so she's been following a lot of the prison stuff because that is just, a terrible situation because they don't have soap. They're not allowed to because it's contraband. And so
They're not allowed to have what? You cut out for 1 second.
Hand sanitizer.
Why is that contraband?
Because it has alcohol in it.
And they would drink it.
Yeah, or they'd find a way to distill it or whatever. Yes, it's just on a long list of things that are contraband. And so, obviously the guards, people always say, oh, well, fuck them. They shouldn't have broken the law. It's like, yeah, but there's also guards, there's doctors, there's administrators. And also these people are human beings. And these human beings also have, people don't remember that the people who are in prison, they have daughters, they have sons, they have parents. And regardless of what you think about what they did, no person is an island. Everyone has an interconnected, group of people.
And even if you don't care about them, you still don't want this virus to spread there because you are then potentially, you don't want it to spread anywhere. I don't care if you hate this community or that community. You don't want it to spread in the megachurch, in the prison, in the poor community because you're just not protected against it as long as it's out there and as long as it's spreading. I don't care how high your walls are or what island you live on. I mean, maybe Epstein's island. All right. Let's wrap up with a lightning round of quick questions for you that you submitted some of these ahead of time. And so let's go first, Christian Finnegan, with the Christian Finnegan Dog Report.
Oh, the dog report. Big week for the dogs. We have 2 dogs, Billy Bowlegs and Griswold. Chief Billy Bowlegs. Chief Billy Bowlegs had a haircut on Monday, looking pretty choppy, but pretty good. We took them on a long walk, the Tustin Mountain Trail in upstate New York last night. Nice. Griswold's anal glands need to be expressed, but we can't take him to the vet. He's a slightly older dog, and so poop consistency has not been quite where we want it.
Well, I mean, it sounds to me like you've got a really good opportunity to make a viral video, things that you have to do when you don't have access to the
Good point.
Yeah.
My big passion project that I want to do is I want to, if I was a musician, I want to get together like comedians and celebrities who have written songs to their dogs, of which I think everybody who owns a dog has a little song they made up for their dog, and record those songs onto an album.
Okay.
Like a charity album.
I like it.
I have a song that I used to sing to Griswold called I Know You Got a Potty, and I'm pretty convinced that it's a hit.
I want to hear it.
It's like a Chicago house song, kind of like that RuPaul song, sort of Supermodel of the World. It's in that sort of genre, and the chorus goes, "I know you got a potty. I know you got a potty. I know you got a potty because the poop is in your body."
I do not want to laugh at that.
And I hear the whole thing. I know the arrangement it's going to be a hit. I'm telling you.
All right. I like this one. Our weekly bygones. This is a really good idea.
Oh, yeah. I didn't necessarily know that we were going to toggle through these now. Just that, like, we were talking about, is there something we could do on a weekly basis?
Let's try them.
Check-in?
Yeah. Well, these are all good ideas. So let's just experiment with them, see what people like.
Sure. I just thought that, in this time where we're all going through something, we're starting to get more of a sense of what's truly important and what's not. And we all carry around a lot of useless grudges against people who've done us wrong over the years. And I thought maybe it would be a nice thing for once a week for you and I to absolve someone who did us wrong. We could even role play it if you like. I could be that person. You could forgive me and I could forgive you. And that would allow us to sort of go about our lives with a slightly lighter spirit. I'm
not sure I'm ready for it.
There's got to be somebody.
There is, and I'm just not sure.
Okay, it's somebody it doesn't have to be.
It's a comedian that both you and I know, and I enjoy my grudge against him.
Okay, let's save that one for when you've gotten a few under your belt.
Okay.
Is there a Home Depot employee that wronged you? Is there a neighbor who commented on your garbage being out too long?
I'll do my neighbor. Yeah. I'll absolve this asshole neighbor of mine. Yeah. How do I do it?
Tell me what the person did that made you so angry.
He has a property dispute with me, and he said my bushes were on it. It's not even his house; it's his mom's house. But he quote speaks for his mom, and he says that my bushes were on his property, and he had this really horrible. A number of times now, he's yelled at me and been a massive asshole.
Are these bushes that you planted?
Yes.
And when did you plant them?
I don't know. A couple of years ago, I thought it was my property because he wasn't taking care of it. He never mowed that section of the lawn, so I just assumed it was mine. But I said to the guy, I was like, "Hey, I'll how about I'll pay for whatever you want landscaping and get it done. You get to decide." And it's an offer you can't refuse. He said no and called me a bunch of names in front of my daughter.
So he is mad at you for planting these bushes, but he doesn't want to do anything to fix the situation?
No, he said
he just wants to be mad at you.
Yeah, he said he's going to get a property surveyor and tear them out himself. I was like, you do what you got to do. But yeah.
Yeah. And how many bushes are these we're talking about?
There's a couple bushes. They're nice. They flower. They're nice.
Yeah. So
it's just a property thing. It's like it's on his castle.
It's possible that he's just doing that because he's angry about something else in his life, and this is a simple, specific thing that he can get upset about and blow off a little steam on somebody. And he doesn't even live there. You said it's his mom's house,
right?
So he can just blow steam on you and then go back about his life.
That's right.
It sounds like maybe you're ready to forgive this person and move on with your life, Pete.
I'm not, but for this segment, I'm trying.
Okay, I'll try to be that guy. Hey man, I'm gonna rip out those bushes. I'm gonna get a land surveyor in here, and I'm gonna call you a bald little turd in front of your daughter. What do you think about that?
You motherfucker.
Okay, you're not ready yet.
I'm not ready.
Clearly not ready yet. All right, you try.
All right. Well, I like both these ideas, and we'll keep them going. And I appreciate you joining me, pal. This is I love talking to you. I think you're really smart, really funny, really interesting. Always have a good point of view and a lot of empathy for just about everybody. And I appreciate you joining me very much, sir. Christian Finnegan, everybody, on Twitter, at Christ Finnegan. Go buy all of his albums and what else? Anything else? What's up with the podcast?
What'd you say? What was the last
Are you doing the podcast? What's going on?
I am starting for the podcast, but it's not anything to speak of yet because it doesn't technically exist quite yet.
All right,
but
well, I look forward to talking about it and promoting it. All right,
thanks,
man.
dude.
Thank you very much, Christian. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete. Have a great day.
All right, Christian Finnegan. Follow him on Twitter at Christ Finnegan, and that is the show. Dr. Aaron Carroll, CNBC's Ron Insana, and Christian Finnegan. Look at that. How about that? We had health, we had finance, we had comedy and life with Christian, and hopefully I'll con him into joining me every Friday here on the show. And we've got all of you, and we're building this community. Support this podcast, which is daily. No advertisements. I'm doing this insanely irresponsible, crazy thing, which is to try to make a living doing a podcast. $5 will go a long way. Consider us a subscription on Patreon. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick, or go in the show notes and you can see how to get a paid subscription. I got people paying $10 and $20, $25, $100, $50, $150 from one guy who I really have grown to like and respect, a doctor down in Texas who knows who he is. Thank you all so much for listening to today's show. I hope you learned something. I certainly did. And thank you very much for joining me and supporting me. Whoever you are, wherever you are, there's got to be somebody somewhere who has never reached out to me but listens to this show. If that's you, today's your day. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and I will talk to you on Monday or on social media, probably over the weekend. Hang in there, everybody. Crazy time. Strange days. There's something about this time that makes me want to just, I don't know, keep living, experiencing it. It's so crazy. It's so weird. It's so out of the ordinary. It's so routine breaking that there's something about this time, this terrifying, disconcerting human experience in time that, I don't know, makes you feel glad that you're alive, that something has changed. What's changed?
What's changed is that I've been drinking too much and I should end this podcast, which is sponsored, by the way, by Jack Daniel's Whiskey and sativa strain of marijuana from the Green Dragon in Colorado. Be the change you want to see in the world. I'll talk to you when I talk to you.